Hello everybody, my name is Simon Nicholson from Pyrios. Thanks for joining this live webinar, which we've titled Just How Did Macquarie Telecom Record the Highest Net Promoter Score on the Australian Stock Exchange? To find out how they achieved this and much more, I'd like to welcome Fionán Mc Donnell, who's the NPS evangelist from Macquarie Telecom. But before I hand over to Fionn, here's a few tips to make the webinar more enjoyable. First, if you're having audio quality issues over the internet, you can dial in to one of the numbers I've sent on the chat window. There's numbers for both Australia and New Zealand. We encourage you to ask questions during the webinar. To do so, please submit them using the questions window on the webinar toolbar. We'll be answering some questions during the presentation and do our absolute best to answer the remaining ones during the time allocated at the end of the session. If by chance we can't answer them all, we will follow up on unanswered questions in writing after the webinar. We'll also be recording this webinar and making it available on our website at www.pyrios.com. I'll now hand you over to today's presenter. Fionn, the stage is yours.
Many thanks, Simon, and many thanks everyone for joining the webinar. It's my great pleasure to share the Macquarie Telecom story as to how we have executed on an NPS strategy to achieve some, we think, phenomenal results. The story actually started 26 years ago when we were founded by David Chudhope and his brother Aidan Chudhope. Because we were founded when Telstra deregulated and other providers were introduced into the telecommunications market in Australia. Our CEO, David Chudhope, determined that we could offer exactly the same technology in terms of copper in the ground at wholesale, because we were a wholesale provider, at wholesale rates with a extra layer of service on top. And he coined the phrase as part of a foundation pillar of the company, personal accountable service, or PAS, where each individual will within Macquarie Telecom is personally accountable for delivering a phenomenal service to our customers. Thanks to NPS, we've been able to use a rule stick or a measure or gauge to demonstrate that focus on our customers and how we value their inputs, their feedback, sometimes above even our own operational efficiencies. We're going to cover today the ultimate question, which is the Fred Reichelt, how likely would you be to recommend, and we say Macquarie Telecom to a friend or colleague. We're going to talk about our customer corridor and how we use Net Promoter Score in as many touch points with our customers as possible. A little bit about some of the key components or the magic to transforming the customer experience. Our people, as we always say, they're fundamental for delivering that outstanding service. A little bit about the motivation for all of our staff, a program within Macquarie Telecom to ensure that Net Promoter Score is at the center of everything that we do. And then sometimes for the financial or CFO people, a clear, tangible, some of the clear, tangible benefits as a result of our focus on this thing called Net Promoter Score. So that it's not just fluff, it's not just a nice to have, but it's actually fundamental in part to our company's success. So first off, let's start with the book, The Ultimate Question 2.0. Fred Reichelt created this about 15 years ago. Interestingly, our CEO read the book or a brief on the book about 15 years ago, handed it to the head of customer experience and asked them to implement it because it was such a topic that resonated with the PAS Foundation. And the customer experience person at the time explained that we had already got it covered within our customer surveying mechanism, and there was no need for an additional question. That person was driven to add the question, and oddly, that was the 51st question of an already 50-strong survey. And I'm not sure how many people on the webinar have ever tried to analyze the 50-strong survey from the entire customer base, but it's quite a challenging thing to do. And not only to identify what the feedback is telling you, but also to identify actions in relation to that feedback, and even longer then to return any kind of thanks or concrete outcomes as a result of the feedback to your customer base. So we had a couple of, I guess, issues in relation to the early adoption of Net Promoter Score, because we were trying to add it to our already quite customer-centric program. And it's very important that in the execution of the Net Promoter Score methodology that you follow the book. We have subsequently followed the book quite prescriptively, so that all other questions or all other survey mechanisms be removed, so that you can focus on the one number and galvanize the organization around that single number. When we got that right, it's actually more like 5 years ago. So we'll fast forward to about 5 years when we then actually executed Net Promoter Score correctly. And interestingly, we've since had Fred Reichelt himself visit our contact center, and he himself commented that the Macquarie Telecom execution of his book is the best execution that he has observed on the planet. So we're quite pleased to get that feedback. A little bit of a summary for those who haven't seen this. It's quite important that the Net Promoter Score question is has got 0 to 10 in terms of responses. So the 0 to 6 are deemed to be detractors quite often, and indeed some of our early customers thought that a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 was a high score. And that could be with some of the other survey mechanisms. But what Fred Reichelt maintains is that in order to be fanatical about a customer service or a supplier, you would need to be that person who is sharing stories about that supplier on the weekend over a barbecue with friends. So that is how likely you would be to recommend, in our case, Macquarie Telecom, to a friend or colleague. And it really is only the 9 and 10 out of 10 respondents, which we call promoters, who would be those people. And he has the algorithm that the Net Promoter Score would be the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors to yield the Net Promoter Score. Passives are important because they can allow you to achieve, if there's a large number of passives, it's very difficult to achieve a very high Net Promoter Score. And the Net Promoter Score, for those of you who are good at mathematics, is on a scale of -100 to +100, with the vast majority of service organizations in and around the ±10%. So it follows the standard bell curve. In our industry, when we started Net Promoter Score, a bit like perhaps the financial sector in Australia today, but in telecommunications, we had, or the industry had, an average Net Promoter Score 5 years ago of about -45 on this scale. That's including about 120,000 complaints, formal complaints to the telecommunication ombudsman each year in this country. So the vision as part of the creation of our company and our Net Promoter Score journey has been to create a customer experience that is best beyond our class, because we believe the bar within our industry is low, and if we have this fanatical focus on our customers, that we'll be able to knock the ball out of the park and achieve. At the time when we started, it was Harley Davidson type fanatical support. They were on +81 as their score when we started. And so we were aiming very high with our industry -45. The first Net Promoter Score that we yielded when we started the program was +11, which we were quite proud of. And I think the main reason for this webinar is to focus on how did we move upon that great foundation of PAS, but how did we move from +11 to our current score of +66, being the highest score of any company that publishes the Net Promoter Score listed on the ASX. So what we do within Macquarie Telecom is we try to identify the entire customer experience, from customers or prospects researching our web pages to signing up with Macquarie during that pre-sale sales process, to customers who have been a long time with Macquarie, and also including customers who are leaving Macquarie. So for whatever reason, whether it be M&A or other activities, there are touch points throughout that customer journey with Macquarie Telecom. And for each of those touch points, we're trying to identify how can we better our service to our customers. It's critical that we don't over survey, because we don't want any survey fatigue, but we do want to survey customers in as many touch points as possible. The lion's share is in what we call the use segment. So that's predominantly incident management, where our customers are phoning, or we're phoning our customers back in relation to a fault we or they have identified within their network. And we are resolving that in the way that we would, good operational efficiency, following the ITIL best practice. And at the end of that interaction, once we've resolved and confirmed the resolution with our customer base, we're inviting them to participate in the Net Promoter Score survey. If we receive any feedback other than a 9 or a 10 out of 10, we are calling back that customer to understand how we could have improved that service. Same is true within the pay corridor, that's around our billing disputes team. Same is true within our receive corridor, where we've implemented a project or a program of work, and we're trying to identify, hey, how could we have done that better? So in every instance, we're asking questions so that we can identify how can we improve our service to our customers, and we're very open for their feedback. The main reason customers, or indeed the general public, don't participate in a surveying mechanism is because of a belief that, and this is true, I have to say, for the vast majority of survey mechanisms, they believe that the response to their survey or that survey doesn't go anywhere, or certainly doesn't go to the benefit of the customer or the person receiving that service. We turn that around within Macquarie Telecom by calling our customers back within 24 hours of them placing their call or giving us their NPS feedback. Why do we do that? We do that so that they can understand we are passionate about their feedback, that we're grateful for their feedback. Also, that they've made some investment into their own time, their valuable time, to give us that feedback, and we want to thank them for that investment. They also, as part of the survey mechanism, not only give us a score, but they also answer the question, why did they give us that score? And we take that feedback seriously. We analyze it, we look at the ticket notes, we look at the screen recordings, because we, in our contact center, we record all of the screen activities, and we listen to the recording of the call. And this is a manager performing these activities, not the individual who perhaps took the call. And when we've determined all of that historical or chronological pieces, we'll call the customer back and say, many, many thanks for your feedback. We just try to unpack, having now analyzed the call or the resolution of the incident, trying to understand how could we have improved that service. By making those callbacks within the 24-hour period, we moved the participation rate from the teens, which is where we started. In fact, when we started, we didn't do the verbal invite. We did an automated email invite, and that had the single-digit participation rates. Moved that into the teens by having a verbal invite, but knocked it out of the park in terms of customer response rate once we had this 24-hour supervisor callback loop. Our customers became, or started to become, fanatical because they understood how valuable we found their feedback, not only self-serving for us, but also in terms of taking their feedback into action and delivering outcomes that were for the betterment of our customer base. So sometimes it's training, sometimes it's a new process. It's not important what the actual content of the feedback is. Important is that it's visible. If there's a process enhancement, for example, we will log that on our customer portal as a problem record, and we'll track that problem record through to resolution, whether it takes a day, 2 days, or even a month, 6 months. because sometimes some process changes can take some considerable time. But once you've captured an item for continual service improvement, it goes on our portal, customer visibility of it, and when we resolve it, of course, we'll say we've resolved that. Thank you so much for your feedback. It helped us improve our process, our service to you, but also quite often our service to the many other customers who may have also benefited from that process change. And thereby we're creating an investment from customers, investment from ourselves, and they feel part of the success for them, but also for us and our other customers. So that kind of frenzy of fanatical support is achieved by really listening to our customers and providing them feedback on their feedback to us, and they really enjoy that. So a massive game changer on a Net Promoter Score journey, moving us from +11 to around +33, simply by implementing this supervisor feedback loop. Second part of the magic was all around the power of transparency. When we launched our contact center, we included a key component, which was that when a customer gave us feedback, that feedback, whether at the time it was originally CSAT, but now Net Promoter Score, but that feedback is immediately presented to what we call our customer service professionals within our contact center. So when I'm on a call resolving a ticket or resolving a billing dispute with a customer, I resolve that incident. I then invite that customer to participate in the Net Promoter Score survey. When they provide the feedback to based on the interaction, then I have the response to that immediately presented on my screen. What it does is it changes my behavior during our interaction in anticipation of a 10 out of 10 score, because it's no longer the average of an average that I may or may not have a supervisor or a managerial conversation with on a quarterly or a half yearly or a yearly performance review basis. It's a number that's going to hit me right at the end of my call or right at the end of our interaction. And so my behavior is changing, anticipating that high score. And it is presented not only to my screen, but it's also presented, the aggregate is presented into our contact center. And if you can see the slide, that's one of the plasma screens within our contact center. So that by name, we are sharing the actual Net Promoter Score month to date for every individual within our contact center. So this isn't just my number, it's also an aggregated number for the contact center, but that my number is visible to everybody. Again, it's not data hidden away, it's not something that I can hide behind, it's right out in front. Now, when we started doing this, I thought it might be controversial, but interestingly, it's supported by all our staff, because people who've had bad experiences have long memories. And the fact that they provide us a 2 or something other than a 9 or a 10 might be in relation to an incident that's happened a long time ago. It's not important exactly what it's in relation to. What's important is that it is an actionable piece of data. And we've earned the right to have the conversation around it with our customers through our supervisor feedback loop, but we've also earned the right to have a conversation around it as a team within the contact center, because the data is presented to everybody. And rather than requiring managers or supervisors to come in and I guess coach and improve, which we do as well in terms of quality assurance, but coach and improve in terms of the customer experience, what we find, because the data is there front and center for everyone to see, that the entire contact center staff responds to the data that we're presenting real time and tries to understand, hey, what happened with that customer? How can we provide a better customer experience? And so the power of that transparency results in the peer pressure or the peer groups providing the answers so that they can understand, hey, how can we provide a better service? Interestingly, as part of that transparency, we also share the same data in all of our branch offices around Australia, sometimes slicing the data by geography or by business unit or by manager, so that, yes, we have some healthy competitive tension. But what's important there is that it's not a statistic. It is real-time data it becomes then a topic as you go to the water bubble or go to have the breakout areas, because you see all our staff see those numbers on the screens real time. And the other part that's key is that it's one single number. It's just the Net Promoter Score number. It's not any other statistics around customer loyalty. And there are many other systems, metrics, other data points that we could use. What we've said is no. As per Fred Reichel's book, we don't want to fall into the trap of analysis paralysis. We want to absolutely share just the Net Promoter Score number so that we galvanize around that single number. Is it the ultimate? Is it the best? It's actually not too important. What's important is that it is a single number and everyone therefore can rally around it and have a common understanding and use it to improve our services and provide a better customer outcome across all of those customer segments that I mentioned earlier. Key behind, sorry, yes, indeed, Simon.
I've just got a question coming. Is it all right if I ask that right now?
Absolutely, please jump in.
Sure. So somebody has asked, during the implementation of NPS, did you have any resistance to change? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Thanks, Sam. Good question. So MOC is quite an important topic. It's really key, crucial with any change program to focus on communication. What we were very fortunate within Macquarie Telecom, and having explained our Net Promoter Score success to many other contact centers or people focusing on this customer-centric journey, is one thing to have the contact center management team on board, but it's critical to have all of the key stakeholders across the business on board as well. So within Macquarie Telecom, we're very fortunate because our co-founder, David Chudhope, is one of the people who created the foundation on PAS, or Personal Accountable Service, as I mentioned. But now we had this metric called Net Promoter Score to gauge the success of our PAS, and therefore we had his buy-in from the onset, but also all the way through. Interestingly, Simon, on this slide, it's all about the employee value proposition. And while we have 5 key criteria around candidates for our contact center. So for our contact center, we must, the candidates that we have within the gene pools we examine cannot have come from a contact center background. They can't have come from the telecommunication industry either. So those 2 gene pools are ruled out. They also have to have an affinity for IT. So they are the guy or the girl who has installed the multimedia system at home. They have to have tertiary education, so some proven ability to learn. But most importantly, they must have something that we call the gold class customer service. So the gold standard of customer service, which we borrowed from the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. They have, we're part of the consultancy we used when we created our contact center. So interesting in terms of that key stakeholder buy-in from CEO down, our CEO was involved and is still involved today in terms of ensuring that those 5 mandatory requirements are met with every hire. So I guess there's not many contact centers that have criteria that are examined at CEO level, and that's what we have. So the management of change piece, a bit of a long answer to your question, Simon, or that question, but the management of change piece was all around ensuring that we had good, clear communication, but key stakeholder buy-in from exec level or levels within the business, which we were very fortunate to have. I hope that answered that question that came up. If I need to expand further, then of course, please do jump in with the questions on the question panel. Other key aspects of the employee value proposition that we find a little interesting is that we, other than focusing on not the telecommunications, not the contact center gene pools. We focus on the hospitality gene pools, which is where we find the people who get gold-class customer service to the core. So we overlay on those core foundations the product, the technology requirements to be able to assist our customers within the telecommunications and cloud service space, so that they're able to provide first, second level troubleshooting diagnostics for our customer base, but the foundation must be there in terms of gold-class customer service. They are coming from that hospitality, or majority coming from that hospitality industry. We offer them a maxed fixed-term contract of a maximum of 2 years, which is interesting. And I know I challenged our CEO when he said it's a fixed-term contract of 2 years. I said, I've been in operations a long time. If we have a great one, we identify a great one, we'll probably want to keep them longer. And he argued that we didn't want complacency to drift into our contact center. And it was paramount that we stuck to a 24-month fixed-term contract. So that's what we've done. And it's interesting that we hire with that proposition. We include in that proposition, because people haven't come from our industry, we include some additional education or extracurricular type accreditation mechanism, whether that be an MCP, CCNA, PMBOK, some entry-level accreditation that these individuals wouldn't have from within either the hospitality or multimedia type backgrounds. We offer that at our cost as part of our 2-year graduation program, so that when they're finished at 2 years, they are very valuable within our industry. They've had 2 years experience within our contact center, but they're also able to go on with that accreditation, whether it be with Macquarie Telecom or beyond, or outside of Macquarie Telecom. And when we come through to the 18th month, because we have a 24-month no poach clause, so that other areas of our business, while they may see fabulous candidates, and we quite often have fabulous candidates come through our contact center, we want to get the value out of those resources. So we have a 24-month no poach clause, but on the 18th month, we allow those individuals to sit with line managers across our business and see if they're interested in working or being redeployed into other roles. Important is that it's not a guarantee, it's not a career for life. So they do need to demonstrate that they're adding value right the way through the 2 years and contributing to that great customer outcome we have in terms of Net Promoter Scores. But on the 18th month, they can start to look at other business units. And on the 25th month, if they're successful in their candidacy, they can move on to the greater Macquarie Telecom. What's important during that journey is that we remove as much noise as possible so that they can focus on the Net Promoter Score. So what we've done within our contact center is, some contact centers measure staff on grade of service, or GOS, abandonment rates, the average handling times. We're saying ignore all of those standard contact center metrics, because they're not interesting for the customer service professional in order to achieve great customer outcomes. They are interesting for the contact center manager, perhaps, but not for the individual. So what we say for the individuals is, we only want you to achieve one outcome, and that is the Net Promoter Score. So we remove the noise of all the other stats, focus on the Net Promoter Score outcome, and provided your Net Promoter Scores across your customer base are trending positively or remain within our company's targets, then you will be advanced within your career within the 2-year period, so that we do small pay increases on the 6-monthly mark. And then indeed at the end of the 2 years, they can, if it's successful, move out into the greater Macquarie Telecom. So we find we have engaged employees. Of course, we have all the other standard contact center success events and team celebrations like every other contact center. But for us, it is simply about achieving that Net Promoter Score target right the way through within Macquarie Telecom, or within the 2-year fixed term contract. We found, interestingly, and this slide talks to how we've attracted some top talent into our contact center. And what we found is if they're successful within moving into the greater Macquarie Telecom, that they've also been incredibly successful in those roles. And we have some individuals who have now gone on to managerial positions. We have people who have moved into sales, people who have moved into billing. And so we've got some great cross-DNA population or pollination, of that gene that we've created within our contact center across the wider Macquarie Telecom. So it's key that our new hires are seeing that success and they can be part of that success as well. There we go. It's also important, I guess, to mention around how we motivate the staff, not just within our contact center, but across the board within Macquarie Telecom. Here we're looking at the company. When we launched the Net Promoter Score, as I said, we were on +11. We had the supervisor feedback loop move us to +33. We had the harnessing transparency move us to +55, and indeed in the meantime, +66. But that's not within the contact center or that billing dispute team or the service delivery team only. It's across all of Macquarie Telecom, because within Macquarie Telecom, whether you're customer-facing staff or not, 20% of your at-risk bonus is paid based upon the company achieving its Net Promoter Score targets. And interestingly, when we first launched Net Promoter Score to that billing dispute team, they complained because they thought, hey, how can we possibly contribute to a positive Net Promoter Score? The vast majority of times customers phone us in relation to a billing dispute. We end up explaining that the bill is right and they need to pay that bill. And they figured that that meant that they could only lead to poor Net Promoter Score results. And what we explained as part of our cultural change for that team, who interestingly had an initial Net Promoter Score of -30, and therefore there were challenges to how they could be paid on achieving a Net Promoter Score outcome. We explained that the transaction that they had to work through can be very, very difficult. But if that they were to treat the customer during that engagement with respect, integrity, and were able to explain why the bill was the bill, or why this either a pro-rata charge or some additional billing that was part of that billing for that month with respect, and allowed the customer to understand that in detail and focus more on the customer during the dialogue or during that conversation rather than the transaction, that yielded a very positive Net Promoter Score outcome. And that team, in fact, moved from -30 at that time when we started, and now on +60, which is an outstanding achievement considering that our product base largely hasn't changed since our introduction of Net Promoter Score. The service we provide largely hasn't changed within that focus on Net Promoter Score, but simply the cultural change within the billing dispute team has enabled them to have satisfied customers, even though they're talking about quite a difficult topic. The program within Macquarie Telecom to make sure that this is front of mind for all of our staff is not something prescriptively that says, when this happens with this customer, you must do this. We instead say, you're all empowered to delight customers in everything that you do, all of our staff. And it's quite a nice message, and if it's fully understood, can be executed very well. But in order to make sure that all staff are adhering to that level of empowerment, we'd like to share the stories of our Net Promoter Score successes, or those stories where we have delighted our customers. So, for instance, during a recent mobile phone fleet transition into Macquarie Telecom, our mobile phone provisioner was chatting to the fleet admin within the customer, and that person, they were on the mobile phone at the time, they left their office without their wallet, inadvertently forgot their wallet and their Opal card, which was their means of getting home. And they went back to their office to try and retrieve their Opal card, and of course the office had closed, couldn't get back in. But because our mobile provisioner felt fully empowered while they were chatting about the mobile fleet introduction to Macquarie Telecom, understood clearly that customer had an issue. The issue has nothing to do with the services that Macquarie Telecom are providing, but they took it upon themselves, because they were empowered, to use their own personal Uber account to make sure that that person got a transportation home. And because it was the mobile fleet provisioner's Uber account, they were able to see and track that person got home safe, and we're able to send a little text saying, "Hope you're home safe." And of course, the response was, "That's fabulous, thank you very much," from a mobile service provider to have provided that level above and beyond service. It's a good story. It shows that we do go above and beyond. But the important point for this webinar is to say the Heartbeat program is where we share those stories as often as we can. So standing up at team meetings, making sure that it's not just one person's great story that's shared within a team, but across the entire company. We share those stories as often as we can. We have a little reward program that says, we'd like to acknowledge the best story of the quarter, best story of the half, and there's some prizes and extra bonuses for those individuals. So we're keeping those stories alive, we're sharing them as often as we can, and therefore we don't need to prescriptively tell people how to delight customers. We're saying you're empowered to delight customers in everything that you do. I mentioned at the start that we were going to talk about some of the tangible benefits, and this is for some of the finance people who may challenge why you have such a focus on customer service. What's important is we were managed not only to achieve, I guess, a massive jump in a Net Promoter Score itself, which is quite valuable, especially for our sales staff, but also we were able to reduce the number of days that our outstanding debtors take to pay their bill. So, and that was from an average of 11 days when we started this program down to 4. The reason behind that, we believe, is because when an accounts payable team is going through the invoices one by one on a Friday afternoon, they can choose with each invoice, shall we process that today or shall we delay it? And we think because we have this focus on our customers that they look favorably on our invoices and pay that faster. And I say we've seen a massive drop, over half, in terms of the outstanding debtors paying their bills on time, which of course our CFO is delighted to see. We've also had an increase in customer retention during the same period as we've had that focus on Net Promoter Score. So our customer retention now up to 97%. And also interestingly, as Macquarie Telecom has predominantly 4 lines of business, we actually like to talk about solutions when we're talking to our customers and prospects. But internally, we have 4 lines of business. It's around mobiles, data, voice, and cloud service. And when we started on our NPS journey, we had an average of 1.8 lines of business per customer, and because of our focus on Net Promoter Score, our cross-sell has had some tremendous success, and we now moved that 1.8 up to 2.4 lines of business as an average for each of our customers. So we're seeing real tangible results as a result of the focus on Net Promoter Score. Just moving on. So we had initially a target, quite a lofty target, we thought at the time, of plus 50 from our CEO. We were on plus 11, but because we were able to adhere to Fred Reichhel's book quite strictly, we had those massive paradigm shifts from plus 11, plus 33, plus 50, and now plus 66. What we're saying here with this slide is, it's up to you, both our customers, prospects, and Macquarie Telecom staff. We think we got this thing, a mechanism within Macquarie to enable success in this space, but we're saying it's up to you in terms of delivering great customer outcomes, because we need the feedback, we can certainly demonstrate our ability to respond to that feedback, but we need that feedback in order to be able to better perform in this space. And for sure, you know, bad things will happen, incidents happen. It's really about how we respond. It's about acknowledging it. It's about acknowledging that feedback from our customers and demonstrating our passion for customers in that space and seeing the financial results as a result. And hopefully, you know, tomorrow we will push that Net Promoter Score plus 66 even higher and maybe achieve, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, that Harley-Davidson Wonderful Success or some of the other organizations on the globe who have this focus on Net Promoter Score achieving also similar results.
Fionn, just another question. Is it expensive to implement NPS?
Thanks, Simon. We, as part of the journey, we made some learnings in this space. So we did invest in various mechanisms and sometimes other consultants, and some of that did prove a little bit costly. What we've determined in the meantime is, as long as you have that executive focus and sponsorship, that the execution or implementation does not need to be expensive. We have a very basic or now common practice IVR within our contact center, as most contact centers do. The surveying mechanism leverages that IVR. We secure the Net Promoter Score response within a database that our IT team manage, and we aggregate that data on our screens. Again, we're using an internal IT team. So we did look at third parties in that space and perhaps more expensive options, but we found that the mechanisms, the key mechanisms in order to capture, collate and share our Net Promoter Score results could be done largely in-house and therefore in an inexpensive way. What's important is that we had our mechanism and our Net Promoter Score data independently audited, which was done recently. Emirates CX performed that for our cloud services team, who are achieving, in some cases, some months up to plus 88, plus 90 Net Promoter Score. Results, so they're achieving phenomenal space Net Promoter Scores. It's to be adhered to with executive sponsorship and that, as I say, that galvanizing of the entire company behind the number, so that so it becomes simply part of the culture, part of the DNA, and doesn't need huge programs of work that may be required with some of the other programs within an organization. I hope that answered that question from that participant. Thank you, Simon. We have actually come to the question slide. So if there are attendees that have further questions, I'm more than happy to go through those on the webinar real time.
Yes, just one other question, Fionn, that's come through. Who within the customer organisations do you ask the NPS question?
Good question. So we used to do what we called top-down. So that was around asking C-level, C-suite only, and we got our view, and it is our view. It's quite an interesting view, but it is only our view. In the meantime, we had something like called bottom-up, which was around asking those people at interaction level, and that was also another view or perspective into the customer's lens. Quite different views or quite different perspectives. So that was quite valuable. In the meantime, where we've landed in, we try to, as I said, in the customer corridor, the segmentation slide, is we try to ask for as many touch points as possible. So we have both the C-suite level, which is asking sometimes about the overall relationship, but we're also at the transaction level. And we find that the combination across all of our customer segments gives us a holistic view. And what's important is that we're aggregating all of the Net Promoter Score data into the Net Promoter Score that we publish, the live Net Promoter Score results that we publish on our public-facing web pages. So it's not siloed, it's a single number that represents all of those customer corridor segments. But yeah, we didn't get that right when we started. Again, we learning along the way. We used to ask customers as they opened a ticket within our contact center, hey, how was it like to open a ticket? And that question we found is largely self-serving. And so customers get survey fatigue if you don't ask a question that's in their interest. And we since got rid of that question because it, as I say, is self-serving. You need to ask the questions, the single question, how likely would you be to recommend Macquarie Telecom to a friend or a colleague based on this interaction, so that we can provide a better service to you. And we find that if we ask that across each of those customer corridor segments, a combination of that, all of that data gives us the holistic view and a true representation of customer sentiment.
Thanks, Fionn. And just a follow-up question that's come through. Do you ask each corridor segment the same questions?
Yes, largely. Good question. It might be that we're talking about in the incident management space in relation to the resolution of the ticket. It might be in the receive space in relation to the project we have just implemented for you, Mr. or Ms. Customer. But largely, because we want the answer to the question to be a Net Promoter Score on a scale of 0 to 10. So while we're asking about perhaps a different part of the corridor, we're asking the same question. And that means that we can aggregate the data. And we're not trying to force, I guess, a different outcome or trying to skew the data. We're asking exactly the same question in every instance, which gives us the benefit of aggregating the data to a single number. So short answer, yes, and I think for good reason. And thank you for that question.
Thanks. Thanks, Fionn. Just had another couple of questions come in. The first one is, how many call centres does Macquarie Telecom have, and how do you keep the NPS dream alive across call centres away from head office?
Great question. So we have two main, I guess, hubs of that we call a call center. One is the Macquarie Hub, focusing on the telco part of our business, satisfying mobile voice and data customers. And then we have something called the Hosting Management Center, which is a similar operation, but focuses on our cloud services business and federal government business. And the second, the key difference between the two is the Hosting Management Center includes engineers, also with a concierge type focus on customer sentiment, but also always with engineers. And so there's those main two entities. There are, of course, as I mentioned before, the project management team, project management office, there's a billing team. So there are pockets of teams where we do the Net Promoter Score mechanism, but we have those two key ones, and honestly, between the Macquarie Hub and the Hosting Management Center, it really is the lion's share of the data that contributes to the Net Promoter Score outcome. How do we keep it alive? It's quite simple. It's about sharing the stories as often as possible. So, you know, the book from Ritz-Carlton, where we got a lot of the thinking here, is called The New Gold Standard. And the Ritz-Carlton stand up their staff before their shifts every morning, 8 a.m. and share the best story from the last 24 hours. We're doing the same within our team meetings. So we share the best Net Promoter Score story within our team meetings. And that, again, as I said earlier, stops it from being a prescriptive internal facing mechanism to an empowered mechanism, so that staff can see, hey, that colleague, that other staff member did that great thing for that customer, I could do similar things. And we're not constraining our staff. It's interesting. Our CEO, who is part of the induction of every individual new hire within Macquarie Telecom, stresses that everyone is empowered to delight their customers in everything that they do. And it's one of the budgets that our CEO says that they should exceed. So thankfully not that it is exceeded, because otherwise we might be out of business, but we are empowered to. That's the difference. So that level of empowerment combined with the sharing of the stories through our Heartbeat program is how the Net Promoter Score story is kept alive.
Thanks, Fionn. Another question. So this question is, how do you balance your efforts between the feedback from detractors versus those from promoters? In other words, how do you avoid beating the drum about what's broken?
It's a great, if I understand the question correctly, the beating the drum is around calling or working through with customers what we have gotten wrong, perhaps. And that's where we invest the majority of our time, because we value that feedback. If we've gotten it wrong and there's a learning, let's capture it, let's improve. Because if we focus in that space on that valuable customer feedback, we believe it'll have been a worthwhile investment of our time, and we will provide a better service. That better service will result in a higher Net Promoter Score that results in more revenue. So, you know, in correlation with the Fred Reichel theory, the focus on customer service yields more revenue, is why we're happy to invest that time. Interestingly, some organizations where we've said, hey, we call everyone who gives us anything other than a 9 or a 10 within 24 hours, have said, hey, how can you invest that amount of time? And I say, yeah, well, if it's too much time, that's all right. Maybe start with just your zeros, and then go to your zeros and your ones, and then increment it through to as far up as you can afford. And what we found, because it's exactly how we did it when we started, what we found was the numbers of zeros and ones dropped out dramatically as soon as our customers realized that the feedback that they gave us, we were taking seriously, and we were doing something about it. And that was the eureka moment when we started to create fanatical customers who were happy to invest their time by giving us the rich feedback, good and or bad, but when they realized we were acting on it. So the investment on the detractors has really paid off, and we found has resulted in far fewer detractors because they're invested. And interestingly, when we opened our contact center, we lowered because of our focus on ITIL, we lowered our open tickets at any one time by 75%. And what we've found in the meantime, that it's been quite sustainable, because happier customers actually log fewer tickets. And that's obviously very beneficial to us. The happier our customers, the less incidents that we have, or less noise around our incidents that we have. And our operations teams can focus on operational efficiencies, but there are fewer operational efficiency actions because of a focus or a higher priority that we put on customer centricity.
Thanks, Fionn. The next question is, what are some of the significant changes you've made as a direct result of NPS customer feedback, for example, in technology investment?
Great question, thank you. I think the obvious one, I didn't call it out yet, but the obvious one we did, when we opened our contact center first, we had all of our lines of business supported out of the one Macquarie Hub contact center. We had a huge focus on this concierge function, borrowing from the Ritz-Carlton methodology, where we wanted to ensure that the first experience, the first syllables uttered from our contact center customer service professionals showed that we were managing, that we were caring, that we were taking care of that customer service experience. Like we do when we achieve success, we celebrated that with our customers, and we asked them for further feedback as to how we could improve further. Their answer when it came to cloud service incidents was that some of our customers didn't want to be in quotes, concierged. They wanted to talk to an engineer. And so we took that feedback seriously. We actually changed our internal business process, and now we route our calls where a customer, when they call our contact center IVR or select cloud service, they get routed through to our newly created hosting management center. And as I said earlier, that's populated with engineers. So you're talking straight to an engineer. Customers really value that change, that business process change, not inexpensive change for our business, but customers really value that. And now we have those customers talking directly to an engineer whenever there's an incident in that space. In terms of technology change as a result of customer feedback, I think that there has been some. I'm trying to give you a good example. We have, majority I have to say is in process change around how we work with our upstream carriers, because in the telecommunications part of our business, a lot of the interface with our customers is around managing them through perhaps a fiber cut that's happened that's outside of our control. So we're managing the dialogue with our customer around that technology issue, but the service that we're offering is around the communication piece. So we have enhancements, I guess, within our IT systems so that we know in advance of an incident the impact to our customer. So I guess using IT or technology to capture that nuance as we onboard a customer, so that if there is an incident within their specific site that has a specific business impact, that we're able to ahead of or be on the front foot with that customer so that we understand their business impact. And we're not just talking about a fiber cut or whatever the upstream carrier has occurred, but we're talking about, hey, what we can do perhaps in terms of shipping a router in advance of understanding because we understood the full business impact. So we've used Net Promoter Score and the customer feedback to make those changes within our internal systems to provide a better customer outcome. I hope that's properly answered the question.
Great. And I think we've got time just for one more question. This question is, how do you collect the feedback from the surveys in preparation for reporting, and how long does this process take?
Yeah, so again, you can go nuts in terms of spending money in this space. We tried that for a little bit. We decided that our own IVR system was adequate. So we simply invite customers at the end of the interaction to participate in the survey. If they respond positively, that's great. We transfer the call to the IVR. The IVR captures the input on the keypad, and that input is fed through to it's a SQL database. If the answer to that is no, we will actually email that customer within 24 hours asking for their feedback, so that we may not have time at that time of the interaction. That's fine. They may or may not choose to respond to that email. If they did, by the way, we have the bells and whistles within our system not to survey them again for another period, so we avoid survey fatigue. All of that data is collated into a SQL database and presented onto our plasma screens via a piece of software from Interactive Intelligence called Macquarie. But it's part of most standard contact center platforms at this point, so not a huge investment in dollars. I hope that answered that.
Thanks, Fionán. That was a great answer. Thank you. Well, it looks like we're at the top of the hour, so I think we'll wrap there. First of all, Fionán, thank you very much for an extremely informative presentation this afternoon. I think there was something for everyone to take away that we can implement within our organisations to help delight our customers. To all of the attendees, thank you very much for joining us today. As I said during the introduction, we will be sending out a recording of or a link to a recording of the webinar that you can download from our website, and you should be seeing that over the next couple of days. So look out for that, and feel free to share that with your colleagues in your organisation. So with that, I want to say thank you again to everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.